Back in 2008, I started a blog that was called, like you said, Catching Days, based on the quote by Annie Dillard, how we spend our lives, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives. And I've just always loved this idea of realizing that this day, this moment, this is my life. It's happening now. It's not something in the future. It's right this second talking to you on this podcast. This is it. And so I also wanted to have guest writers on, and I wanted something particular. I didn't want to just say, come on and write whatever you want. I wanted to have something special. And when I was, the first 20 years of my life were all French all the time. And I used to read Elle magazine, and Elle magazine had, I don't know if it still does, had a feature on a day in the life of a woman. And every time I bought the magazine, that's what I would read first. So it occurred to me, with my focus on days days in lives, that I could ask a writer to write about their day. So in 2009, I started on the first of each month inviting a writer to write about their day. And so now at this point, I don't really have a blog anymore, but there's a tab on my website, and that it features the How We Spend Our Days series. And I have over a decade of essays by writers on their lives, and it's still going. I published one yesterday. Rachel Swearingen wrote, and now since January, it's also available on Substack.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have another amazing author with me today. I get to talk to some of the most unique and amazing authors by having this podcast, and it makes me so happy to reach out and talk to more people. And so Cynthia Newberry Martin is here with me today. CynthiaNewberryMartin.com is where you can find all the goodness we're talking about today. I have the website open as we chat. Cynthia's a great author, lots of stuff happening, and a big book tour I'd like to talk about as well. But Cynthia, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you on Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's nice to be here.
It's exciting to meet new authors for me. This is like a joy for me because I get to go behind the scenes. I see your books online and I read the reviews, but now I get to talk to you one-on-one. And I know for the audience that are listening, it's a great opportunity to get to know you as an author. And then when we go to the website to purchase the book, we feel like we already know you, and it adds another level to reading your books. And I really appreciate you giving us your time today. Thank you for doing this.
It's nice to be here. It's nice to talk about all this.
See? Great. Okay, so let's start with this. I'd like to start here. Where are you in our great, big, wonderful world?
I am in Columbus, Georgia, which is about an hour and a half southwest of Atlanta. It's right on the Chattahoochee, on the Alabama border. It's, if anyone out there has read Carson McCullers' The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which is a classic, this is where she wrote it at age 23. So,
wow.
So a literary town.
There you go. There's some history there. I love that. Now, when I'm talking to you on camera, behind you is a wall of books. Now, you've read every single word of every book behind you. Is this correct?
Pretty much, yes.
There you go. I love it. I love it. Because sometimes I meet people with Zoom backgrounds, and this is not a Zoom background. That's a lot of books behind you. So that's a good indication. I think that's one thing we need is more books and less televisions, I think would be a big thing for me.
Yes, I agree. I'm trying to institute a 5 o'clock reading hour. And so that's what I'm working on. Take a pause, pick up a book, put your feet up. Some days it works, not every day.
Yeah. So as an avid reader, what kind of things do you like to read? What's your go-to?
Well, I love Ellen Gilchrist, but I don't think she's writing anymore. Recent favorites, let's see. I loved Rebecca Mackay's new book. I have some questions for you. There was a wonderful book I just read that is published by Feminist Press by Cassandra Lane. It's called We Are Bridges. and it's a memoir that she wrote about her family, but there's only so much that she knows. And it's either her great grandfather or I think it was her great grandfather was lynched. And that was her starting point to find out as much as she could about that. And so at certain points, the memoir veers into imagination, but it's based in fact, and it's all we have. And so it's a wonderful book. I highly recommend it.
So what kind of authors inspire you, and what about them inspires you? Like, is it their writing style? Is it how they approach their craft? What kind of things, when you find a great author, you're like a great song that we talked about before we hit record with Emily James. What's about an author that you're just like, there's something about them that I love?
Well, it has to be language, the way they write. I have to say that's the most important thing to me. I will follow a writer anywhere who writes good sentences with lots of details, and a writer who cares as much about how the story is told as the story itself. So I love books by Pam Houston. And it's just, I love stories of women's lives. And I don't mean it has to be, let's see how to say it. It fascinates me, all the different lives that women lead. And so I will follow stories anywhere that talk about how a woman is living.
And before we hit record, we talked about Emily James and the song Brooklyn. And there's a line in that song that really speaks to you, and the power of you can visualize the words as they come across. I know it's in song form, but again, it's still writing, right? So what is it about that song in particular that really stands out to you?
It's so interesting because, as I mentioned, it's so weird being a writer and not having lyrics be the most important thing. But I go to music to take me kind of away to a different place. But in this song that you're talking about, Brooklyn by Emily James, there's a line that she says, "Fourth floor walk up." And it just does so much for me. That one detail in that song. It really makes the whole song come alive.
Right. And that's the key, I guess, to writing, is how do you approach that as an author with your reader in mind to take them somewhere, right? Because when we start with the page one of a book, we have really no idea where we're going, and you have to build the whole world for us. So what kind of things do you try to put into your writing that are like that fourth floor walk up moment in your book? What do you do?
It's all in the details.
Okay.
And so especially on a first draft, I am reaching for all kinds of details and describing things. Now, not everything makes it into the final draft, but for example, in Love Like This that was just published, there is a cup, and I have it. I'll show you. The listeners won't be able to see it, but I will just grab it. And it's a mug that my daughter gave me, and it was made by a kid in a hospital, and the proceeds went to the hospital. And so when I was there's a scene in my novel where the main character Angelina first she gives this mug to a friend, but then there's a scene where she's actually washing it carefully. And you can see there's a ladybug here, and I think I changed that to a butterfly for the story. But just how it feels in your hand, the solidness, the raised flower, the color of it, and it can the reader, if you describe each of the details, and I think it comes alive for the reader. I was at an event recently where the other writer I was with chose that passage where Angelina is washing that mug to read as one of her favorite moments in the whole book. So it's weird about the details.
So was that a happenstance situation where the mug just was there when you were writing, or was that in your mind before you started writing? How did that happen?
Well, it's always meant something to me. The fact that a little kid in the hospital, who was, in the hospital for an extended period of time, made this mug, and so I've kept it, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, it meant something to me,
right?
And so it was, in fact, sitting on my desk when I was writing. So I don't know what, measure of happenstance and imagination and what was happening in the story came together. But that's, I don't feel like I am, I write fiction. So, but yet I don't feel like I am making things up. I feel like it's more all around me is clay and I'm just molding the clay, like, whatever the weather, the leaves bouncing in the wind outside my window, the way the sunlight is falling through the woods. A stupid, what do you call those things that blow, a leaf blower outside can be, there's just no telling, because all of those things will, if they happen to a character in your story, can bring out that character's personality.
Right.
But I don't feel like I'm just making stuff up. I feel like I'm reaching for things.
Yeah. So is there a point where you get into too much detail and you kind of feel drowning a little bit as an author, and you got to like back away? Like, okay, that's getting really deep now.
Sure. And that's revision.
Okay. Yeah.
I throw it all in there.
Yeah.
I throw it all in there at the beginning, and some of it lands and some of it doesn't. And I can't think of an example right off the bat, but absolutely you can have too much detail. And but I try to, it's a lot easier to see what works after it's in there.
Okay. So again, while we're talking, I have while we're talking, I have your website up and I'm looking at the books. I'm looking at the website. It's beautiful, by the way. Everyone should go there and check out the website, Cynthia Newberry Martin.com. It's great. The books are listed. There's 3 of them I see on the screen. Can you walk us through maybe the books in order and give us kind of an overview of what you've written to date?
Sure. So 3 books, and I think I will start with The Art of Her Life, which is a story about Emily. At 9 years old, she falls in love with a painting by Matisse called Breakfast. And when the novel opens, she is a single mother living in the world of art, but she's lost the thread of her life. She has 2 daughters, and she's also in a relationship with a guy named Mark, but she's kind of here, there, and everywhere. And she feels a pull between Matisse and the world of art and her family. But a contest at the museum gives her hope. She's hoping to see the painting Breakfast again. Matisse's words and paintings are a part of this novel. They kind of occupy her days and her nights. And kind of about a third of the way in, she has a note card of this painting that she loves, and she picks it up. And in that moment, for the first time, she sees something she's never seen before. And so the novel is about the power of art to change and transform an ordinary life. So that's one.
Beautiful.
And that book will be available June 6th. And the second book of the 3 is Tidal Flats. And that book is about a young couple, about 2 people who want different things from life, but want a life together. Excuse me. Cass wants a husband who comes home at night, but Ethan's job takes him to Afghanistan, often for weeks at a time. And Ethan wants children, but Cass does not. They reach an agreement. Ethan will continue going back and forth to Afghanistan for 3 years. And at the end of that time, he'll come home whether Cass wants children or not. And the novel opens 9 weeks before he's supposed to be home for good. And it's clear from the very beginning that it's unclear whether or not that's going to happen.
It's clear that it's unclear. I like that.
Yes. And the third novel of the 3 is the one that I was just talking about, Love Like This, which came out a month ago, and it's about an older couple. They've been married 22 years. Well, they've been married actually maybe 24 years, but they've had children at home for 22 years. And Angelina has no idea what she wants, and she's hoping that the empty house will help her figure it out. But her husband, Will, knows exactly what he wants. He wants her all to himself. And 9 days into their child-free life, he arrives home, comes in through the door in the kitchen, and says he's been fired. And so Love Like This drops the reader inside this long-term marriage and then asks them to weigh the value in sticking with the familiar or venturing into the unknown.
I think there's a lot of people who can identify with that right now. That's amazing. I love it. The one thing I love too, looking at your website, Cynthia, is looking at the covers for each of your books. They're gorgeous. Can you talk a little bit about the power of and the importance of a good cover to your book? Because I'm thinking as I walk through my local bookstore, I see displays of books everywhere, and there's got to be something that catches your eye or brings you to the book. Because again, people are going to see your book before they read it in most cases. Talk about a little bit about your covers specific to your books and just the importance as an author to present a good cover for your book.
Oh, sure. Thank you for asking. I'm glad you like the covers, and thank you for asking. I have always been a reader, and I have often judged a book by its cover.
Its cover, right? Yes.
Yeah. I mean, because just exactly what you said. I mean, you're walking through a bookstore and you can't pick up every book. So which ones do you pick up? It's the ones with covers that speak to you. And I was really lucky with Tidal Flats, which is the story of the younger couple in Afghanistan. And that book was published by an independent press. And we went back and forth with a cover. They had a cover designer, and we just couldn't really find a cover that we loved. And my editor said, you know what we need? We need some millennials. And I said, well, I have millennials. Lots of them grew up, 4 of them grew up in this house. Yeah. And one of them, my son Jack, is a graphic designer, and he designed he stayed up all night and sent us about 8 designs, and we picked the one we liked best. And then my editor took the best cover we did have and Jack's cover and took them to Ingram, which is a company that gets the books in all the bookstores, and let Ingram choose, and they chose Jack's design. So my son Jack designed the cover for my first published book, Tidal Flats. And that was very exciting.
Nice.
And and then the second book, Love Like This, that came out a month ago, is published by another independent press, and the head of the press, Jessica Bell, is a book cover designer. That's her thing. And so she asked for some suggestions, and I gave her, that cover of the Queen album, Hot Space, with the 4, like the Andy Warhol cover.
Yeah.
So I sent that that was my kind of idea, because I use a song from that in the novel. And so she came back with this bold cover that has got it's got blue and red and yellow and purple on the front, and it's a black background, and it's a very bold, exciting cover. And so I love that. So that's nice. and with each, there are four main characters in this book. And what we did, each one of them has kind of something that stands in for them. Like one of them is a squirrel. The four icons on the cover of the book are a squirrel, a bear, a bird, and oddly enough, a house. And you're just going to have to trust me that works together. And
good.
She kept saying, don't you have another animal? And I said, nope, it's a house. Unquestionably, the fourth one is a house. So that's that. And then the cover of The Art of Her Life, the Matisse book, which is coming out in June, also was created by my son Jack. And he took the Matisse painting that Emily loves in the book, which is called Breakfast. And he did a kind of a digital updated version of it. So, like poems are often written to honor a particular poet. You'll read a poem that's after Wordsworth or after Emily Dickinson. And this is after Henri Matisse. So
nice. It's beautiful.
After his painting The Breakfast.
So I hope you paid your son handsomely for all of his great work. This is beautiful, by the way. Many cookies or something extra along the line from mom. So an extra Christmas present under the tree, something like that. But it's really, really well done. So compliments. So your book is kind of the afterthought, or maybe at the end of writing. For you, did you have a vision in your mind of what your book would look like as you're writing it, or did you wait till the end? Kind of give us an insight on that.
The only book that I ever thought about the cover ahead of time was The Art of Her Life, the Matisse book.
Okay.
And I always thought it would have some version of the painting that Emily loves,
nice.
Which is called Breakfast, on the cover. And so that turned out to be true. So that's pretty exciting.
I love it. I see, that's the kind of information I love when I'm on the website now and I know the story behind it. I see the red house on Love Like This, red and black, and I'm like, what's that? So it creates some intrigue for me as a reader to be like, what is this all about? So I love that. I love it. Okay, so we have new authors that are listening to our conversation today, Cynthia. They are at the very beginning stage of writing. They love reading. They love music. They're really identifying with you as an author and getting some inspiration from our conversation. What kind of words of wisdom or guidance would you offer up to a room full of new authors gathered to hear you speak on the writing process? What kind of words of wisdom could you offer to somebody new to the game?
Well, I would say to not give up, to plan for it to take the time it takes. The Art of Her Life, which is the book we were just talking about, actually, that was the first book I ever started writing. And I came right out of the chute wanting to write a novel because that's what I love to read. So I don't know if your listeners are coming to writing from that standpoint as readers or coming as always having wanted to be a writer. But in either case, it takes a while. It's not something for most people. For most people, it takes a while. And I hope that they all love the process, because that's what kept me going for 20 years. I actually wrote for 20 years. I wrote 4 novels in 20 years, but I didn't have any of them published until after that time period. So I love the process, though, and sitting down to write, getting the words on the page, getting closer and closer to the way I wanted to tell the story. And I actually don't think I was skilled enough as a writer to tell the Matisse story until just recently. So while I wish it could have been published years ago, I'm happy that it took, that I waited and was able to publish it when I could do it, when I could write a little bit better, I guess is the way to say it. And the other thing I would say is to, if you're just starting out, to find a community of writers, find people, mentors, yes, but also people just like you, people starting out, people writing, either that you can talk to about writing or that you can just be writers together. A community of writers is so great because it's the one place you don't have to prove it. It's the one place you can just be a writer. It's not about whether your story was accepted for publication or you have an agent or anything else. You can just, in a community, you can just exist and be yourself as a writer. And that's really important for the years and years it takes to become, the writer you want to be. So I would say that enjoy the process and find a community, whether it's a podcast community, an MFA community, a writing group, anything like that. There are all sorts of ways. Or, find a conference that you like going to and go regularly. Your local independent bookstore. Be a regular. Go to events. Meet authors. It's cool. And it'll help you feel and become the writer you want to be. So that's what I would say.
This kind of feels like we've set up the next question, and I love this. You are on a book tour doing exactly what you just said to do. You're out there in bookstores, and you're going state by state. This is exciting to hear about. And we're all coming out of this interesting time in our global history where everybody was inside, locked away. Now we're out doing this again. Talk about your book tour and give us an update. Where have you been? Where are you going as the time of recording? We'd love to kind of talk about this. It's exciting.
Sure. Thank you for asking. The book tour is awesome. When I was waiting for Love Like This to be published, I found out that The Art of Her Life would also be published. And so I thought, well, I want to do something really exciting to celebrate all these books finally coming out. I've got a lot of celebrating to catch up on, is what I was thinking. And so I thought, well, I love traveling. I love reading and writing and traveling. And so I was thinking, all of my books are published by independent presses, which is exciting because these are presses that really love these books. I mean, independent presses, for the most part, publish books they love without regard to whether they're going to be bestsellers or not. And but they often don't have the funds to get the word out about the books. So it's hard for readers to find them. So I thought, well, I'm going to just maybe try to find a bookstore in every state to visit, to try to tell people about these books published by independent presses. And to further that, I thought, well, who's going to come see me at a bookstore in Idaho, because I don't know anybody in Idaho. So then I thought I would join with a local writer. And then I thought, well, I'll join with a local writer of another independently published book. And that way we can help get the word out. And I tell you what, it's just been amazing. I've read a book by an author in each state that I've been to. And the book has been published by an independent press. And these are books that, for the most part, I had never heard of until I went looking for an author in that state. And so it's cool bookstores that I've always heard about, or that somebody says, oh, you have to go to this bookstore. And so I write it down. And for example, at this point, I started not quite a year ago, maybe 9 or 10 months ago on this tour. And I have been to 14 states so far.
Nice.
And I'll be going to, in just a week, I'll be in Vermont for state number 15. And the Vermont bookstore, the Norwich bookstore, is in a little town in Vermont, Norwich, Vermont. But a friend of mine said, I love my local bookstore. And so I thought, well, those are the kind of bookstores I want to come visit and see and walk around on their creaky floors and pull books from their shelves. And
the smell of a bookstore, everything, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it's great.
So do you have all of your bookstores lined up for all 50 states? Are you still in process? Where are you at with that?
It's a total process, and I have started conversations with probably around 10 other bookstores in different states at the moment. And so it's a time-consuming process, but it's one that I love. And it's interactions with the bookstore owners and booksellers and finding the authors in the states and reading their books. And we have we have a very cool format that we use where I choose a favorite passage from the book of the author that I'm joining with.
Oh, nice.
To read out loud. Yeah, it's really cool. And then I say why I chose that. And the author I'm joining with does the same thing. All of this to say, I'm trying not to race through this. I'm trying to enjoy each event. For example, when I went to the bookstore in Montana, Fact and Fiction in Missoula, my husband went with me, and we took a week because we'd never been to Montana, and so that was really fun. So I'm trying to enjoy, like I said, the process of reading the book, getting to know the writer, getting to know the bookstore and the place I'm going. So I have no idea how long it's going to take me to do this.
Because people are going to be listening to this episode like in the near future, but also off in the future as well. And so can they follow along on your journey on the website? Like, how do they know where you're going to be next? And communicate, and how do you communicate with your audience about the plans for the tour?
I share on social media, but yes, on my website there are two places you can go to find information. If you just want to see what's happening with the tour and what state number I'm on, there's a tab called 50 bookstores, and just click on that, and right up at the top you can see current total of 14 bookstores and states. And then if you just want to know my next event, there's under the tab these days, you can see events, and you can see where I'll be next.
Awesome. And
but,
I
was just going to say that on the 50 bookstores page, it's organized by state. And so you can go down in alphabetical order. And like, if you're wondering, if you're sitting in Kansas right now and you're wondering if I've been there yet, you can go down and you'll see that there's nothing for Kansas. So you can email me and say, you have to come to this very cool bookstore we have here. And then that will get the process started. And I also show a picture of all the covers on that, the cover of the book of the author who's joining me and who published their book, and what bookstore, and all of that kind of information.
I love your approach to this, Cynthia. This is great. Like, I'm on the page as you're talking, and I see the books side by side, and I love that you're not just there to promote your book, but you're there to promote the bookstore, which is great. Thank you for doing that. And another author. What a great combination. It's a great event. Great idea.
It's really fun. And we also take a moment at the beginning of the events to look around us in the bookstore and to thank the bookstore owners, and to just take a moment to realize that where we're sitting didn't happen, on its own, that somebody had to want to create this spot where we could all get together and talk about books. So it's just really a fun experience.
So if I'm a small bookstore owner that you haven't been to in my state yet, or an author in the state that you haven't been to yet, can I reach out to you through your website and put my hand up and say, I would love to host you or connect with you? Is that possible?
Please do. That would be
Okay.
awesome.
There you go. So it's right there. And the link will be in the show notes to do that. So again, I don't see anything in Canada where I am. So you are always welcome up here in Canada. Please come anytime. But for those US listeners, and we have a lot that listen to the podcast, authors, bookstores, they're listening to you right now. So maybe we can be part of that journey to connect the dots and have you arrive at some amazing location in the future.
That's right. And I will come to Canada. I love Canada.
There you go. I love it. I'll be in the audience for sure. So the other part to all this is you're doing a blog, another exciting thing that you're doing on top of everything else you're doing. Oh my gosh, you have so much going on. Let's talk about Catching Day's blog. Can you give us an idea about this? Another exciting thing you're working on as well.
Sure. Back in 2008, I started a blog that was called, like you said, Catching Days, based on the quote by Annie Dillard, how we spend our days is how we spend our lives.
Yeah.
And I've just always loved this idea of realizing that this day, this moment, this is my life. It's happening now. It's not something in the future. It's right this second talking to you on this podcast. This is it. And so I also wanted to have guest writers on, and I wanted something particular. I didn't want to just say, come on and write whatever you want. I wanted to have something special. And when I was, the first 20 years of my life were all French all the time. And I used to read Elle magazine, and Elle magazine had, I don't know if it still does, had a feature on a day in the life of a woman. And every time I bought the magazine, that's what I would read first. So it occurred to me, with my focus on days days in lives, that I could ask a writer to write about their day. So in 2009, I started on the first of each month inviting a writer to write about their day. And so now at this point, I don't really have a blog anymore, but there's a tab on my website, and that it features the How We Spend Our Days series. And I have over a decade of essays by writers on their lives, and it's still going. I published one yesterday. Rachel Swearingen wrote, and now since January, it's also available on Substack.
Nice. Okay. Wow. Like, that's a lot of content. That's a big library to go back in time and read through. Talk about who is coming to that? Who's your target audience for the blog when it was active and even while it's being still produced today?
Just writers and readers both. Like if you are a reader and you read a great book by let's see,
Cynthia Martin,
Becca Mackay, for example. You can go to the website and put her name in the search button, and if she has written, excuse me, about her day, that will pop up. And she has in fact written about her day. I think she wrote about her day back in 2009, if I'm remembering, although I'm not really sure. But and also at the bottom of that page, there's a link to all the authors. And so I've got an index where you can either see authors who have written recently, or it's organized alphabetical by first name. And you can go down and see all the different writers who have written about their day. It's really lots of fun. And I try to invite seasoned writers as well as debut writers or writers who don't even have a book out yet, just so that, because of the way the internet works, if you come looking for one writer, you might happen upon another writer, and it's just kind of this like web of writers. And so I'm hoping that, one writer leads to another writer leads to another writer.
Nice. So jumping back to your book tour again, another question just came to mind. If I'm a new author, my book is published, and I'm thinking about doing an in-store event at my local bookstore, with your experience with 14, 15 different stores so far behind you, any things that you've learned about doing an effective event in a local bookstore? Any kind of things we should think about?
Well, reaching out to anyone you know in the area, finding someone in the area who can help you get the word out about the event, that's great. Spending time in the bookstore, making sure you can get there on time. I had a horrible experience for New Mexico. My Uber canceled on me. And so that was the only event I was late to. It just happened recently.
No.
Everybody waited patiently. That was nice. Let's see, advice. I mean, I think the biggest advice I would say would be join with someone. I did for Tidal Flats, my first book, I did a lot of events just by myself. And now with the focus being on joining with someone else, it just opened it's like the world has cracked open. It's so much more fun to do an event with someone else than to do it by myself. And so I think that would be and getting to know the booksellers. That's the other thing. They're awesome. Most of them are working in these bookstores because they love what they do.
Right.
And they're so nice to talk to. So, yeah.
Okay. Let's flip it around then. For a bookstore owner listening to this, and they've never really thought of or done a good job of promoting these in-store events, what kind of benefit to them would it be to host this in their store, little mom and pop bookstore? What would you say to them?
Well, it brings readers in, and that's, something that I think is still, we're still trying to get that back after the pandemic.
Yeah.
People are still hesitant. We got so used to ordering books. Even if we were ordering from independent bookstores, we got used to ordering rather than, that's for everything, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Food and, and clothes and everything. But there's so much magic that can happen during an in-person event. It's amazing. An audience member asks a question, and it just sparks all sorts of things that it's like something rises up during an in-person event that can't quite come out of your computer screen. Yeah. So if you're lucky enough to be able to go to an in-person event, the inspiration is everywhere. It's happening. It happens to the audience members, to the writers themselves. There's just a certain magic from just being in the bookstore and all those books, and you imagine the characters peering out over the tops of the spines, looking down to see who's there. It's just magical being in a bookstore, and being in a bookstore and talking to other people about books just magnifies the magic.
So
I highly recommend it.
I love it. And for the next event, when you come out to see Cynthia, bring your own mug. Your own special mug, bring it along with you and compare.
Yeah.
Because then you have a chance to talk about your own mug and how special that is. So I have one more question for you, Cynthia. But before I ask that question, again, I have the website in front of me. Talk about the website and maybe where you're most active on social media, where people can follow along on the journey.
Sure. So the website is designed. You'll notice that it opens with a photo that I took of Provincetown, where
beautiful.
Yeah, and that's intentional because I wrote for a long time before a book was published, and I did pretty good with that. But I did have a low moment back in 2014 when I couldn't really speak about what was happening to me, that I was working so hard on writing a novel and getting a novel published, but it wasn't happening. And so I took a year where I wrote one true thing about myself every day to try to build back my confidence that I was more than just a writer who hadn't published a book. And I did discover that it worked. I got all my confidence back. So the intentional part about the website is that I didn't want to just open with books on the first page, because truly I am more than my books. I'm the books, the book tour, the how we spend our days, the about me page, all of that is me. And so I didn't want to single out just the books to open with.
Nice.
And then on social media, I'm active on Facebook and Instagram, and still a little bit on Twitter. And you can find me in all of those places. Did you ask me something else too?
Yeah, I was going to close off with a question that I thought I haven't actually asked any other authors this question before,
okay.
But is there any kind of popular advice or things that you've heard in the space for authors that maybe you've tried or you've avoided and you're like, it didn't really work for me as an author? Is there anything that's really popular that maybe some people will be like, that just didn't work for me as an author?
What springs to mind immediately is writing by hand.
Okay.
I am, a lot of people like that. And a lot of people encourage writers to do that. But for me, it doesn't work because I am so freaking left-brained, or I was when I started writing, that I would be writing longhand. And before I would get to the end of the sentence, I was editing and revising the beginning of the sentence. So writing longhand did not allow me to get myself on the page. And I was lucky enough to figure out that typing on a computer happens so fast that I can absolutely kind of disassociate and let the words hit the screen without, editing or revising. And so that's really useful for getting a first draft down, I think. And so I have worked on my allowing my right brain to grow and my left brain to shrink. So I do other things also, like I don't outline because that encourages my left brain. And, some people love outlining, but I don't, because I'm a master at outlining. I can outline the heck out of anything. And that would just take all the life and the fun and the spark out of everything. So Love Like This, in fact, was the third novel I wrote. And that's the novel where my where my right brain finally, I think, got as big as my left brain. And things were happening, like I would walk away from my desk, and that's when my subconscious would take over and say, my gosh, I'm so glad you put your fingers away and stopped typing on that computer. This is a level beyond the typing. It was just in the shower, on a walk. The story was coming to me. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. Everyone, Cynthia NewberryMartin.com is the website. We'll have links in the show notes to go there. You are an amazing guest on the show. Thank you for taking us behind the pen and behind the keyboard and giving us a sense of your writing, showing us the mug that inspires you. And, it's so cool to have time with another great author. And I really do appreciate you making time for us. Thank you for being on Living the Next Chapter.
Oh, thank you. The thanks go to you for having me on here and taking the time to ask these questions. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And as you do your travels, as you go hit the road and you meet all these other great authors, please keep us in mind. We would love to promote them just like you're doing in a very practical way. We would love to promote them here on the podcast. So you're a great example of what we want to do with our podcast. You're doing it in bookstores across the U.S. I think it's an amazing and a stellar idea that many authors should follow as you take the lead. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you for subscribing and following. And you're listening this far in the podcast, so you are my best friend. I'm sorry, but you are now my best friend. So welcome. Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. LivingTheNextChapter.com has a link on the website to our Facebook group. Are you on Facebook? Probably. You can go there and you can actually interact with our guests. You can talk to them. You can hear more about their journey, about their books. You can speak to them directly. You don't need me. You can come right over to LivingTheNextChapter.com, click on our Facebook link to our community. You can talk to other listeners of the podcast from around the world who are on Facebook. And, again, speak with our guests. Don't you want to speak to the guests you just heard from? Yeah, you can do that on Living the Next Chapter. Go over there. There's links to our Facebook group, and you're welcome to join. Thanks for listening.